we've identified gaps or problems. How do we fix it? Is it like flexible service, shared parental leave, other provisions? What would be, say, your top three things that could help solve this problem?
I think the first one is around representation and communication. So it's that you can only be it if you can see it approach. And I reflected on that in another meeting yesterday when we were talking about how veterans are perceived, this worry about veterans being perceived as mad, bad and sad. Well, female veterans aren't perceived at all, but people don't see it as a career, and even less as a career with families. So it's about picking out those examples and using those examples of people who are living it at the moment. The second one is around culture, and it builds on Anna's point about it being acceptable to serve in the military, have a family, and for that family to take precedence at times. Not being worried, not having the presenteeism of being at your computer, at your desk for 12, 14 hours a day, and of senior leaders always setting that example and expecting it from others. Yes, people are there for a life of service. They should be expected to work hard and deliver. But I know from examples of places I've worked since I left the military that those things can be done completely compatibly. It's not exclusively one or the other. And I would say that I've seen some really great examples in the RAF. There is a commitment from the senior leadership to make the RAF more inclusive in the way it works and the way it deals with these issues. But culture change is a massive process. You know, there's still a long way to go on that. And finally, I think, again, the programs that are there at the moment, so we do have flexible working and service, and the RAF have reasonable numbers in taking those up. The wraparound childcare pilot, which the MOD announced last year, is really welcome, and I believe over 250 families have taken up the pilot from an RAF-based perspective, which is a significant number of families there. So that desire is there to engage in that. What I would say is it's a pilot. We need to see more of it because, as Anna said, that ability to use family as childcare, which all the research from the Coram Foundation, from ONS, tells us is what people do if they're non-military. If you're not military and you're in a demanding job, one of the routes to staying in the workplace is by using family childcare. And that is just simply not available to the vast majority of military families. So people leave. The people who are leaving are those generally at junior ranks, because that is where it becomes impossible to financially make things work, because childcare is expensive.
How, if you could give us some sort of view about this, is how could the leadership ensure that this is implemented all the way down to individual units and actually becomes embedded in it? What can they do differently that they're not doing now?
I think that's an excellent question. And my own view is it's almost impossible for an organisation to investigate itself and to ask its untrained command structure to do sometimes quite complex HR, human resource issues. So I believe it's the only UK public body that has no sort of an Ofsted for defence. It has no body that is independent and can actually look into defence. Defence marks its own homework, and this, I think, is the biggest issue. So although it's possible to change that culture, it hasn't happened. We haven't seen the leadership at unit level change. We're still hearing the stories that where problems occur, then CEOs are actually turning a blind eye, and worse, they are actively coercing women to withhold information, and witnesses do not feel able to come forward. My own view is we need an independent body to challenge defence and challenge defence leadership. The specialist equipment, so you look at things like on operations, like body armour is a common complaint for women. It doesn't fit men particularly well, but it definitely doesn't fit women. Helmets, I myself have had problems over the years with trying to get a helmet to fit. If you can imagine trying to be in a combat situation and the helmet falls forward over your eyes so that you can't see, that's a significant problem. And you mentioned on carrying weight, there are roles which women will struggle with the weight, but it is not helped if the webbing and the backpacks don't fit on the female frame. So they sit completely differently on the hips, they sit differently across the shoulders. and therefore that weight is not being distributed in the same way. It's not designed. So the weight distribution works for the male frame, but the weight distribution works very poorly for the female frame. So you're disadvantaging the woman in being able to carry the weight, first of all, because it doesn't fit and it's uncomfortable.
Diane, you mentioned helmets and armour, chest armour. Bearing in mind women have probably generally thicker hair, I think it's fair to say, and obviously a certain physical anatomy in front of them. Those are the problems. How do you think we resolve them?
I think, I believe some of the forces, I think Mr. Elwood mentioned the Israeli Defence Force. It is possible to get equipment designed for the women's shape. Many other industries have done that. It's just defence hasn't. So there is perfectly good safety equipment available that is designed for the female frame. We just haven't invested in it in the MOD.
Would you recommend a career in the armed forces for women?
So I called my book Forewarned for a reason. I didn't call it Don't Join. I still think service is a good thing for men and women. And I think most people who serve feel very rewarded and grateful for having served. I would recommend a career, but I think women are paying an unnecessarily high price for serving. And I think this is the bit that the panel, hopefully I can get these points across. The challenges to women's confidence, to their trust, to how their careers progress are not being addressed in the current system. So I think in that respect, we are still failing.
It's a very short one.
Go ahead.
I just really wanted to add some weight to the earlier witnesses who pointed out their concerns about the service complaint system. It will be writ large, I'm sure, in many evidence, but fact is that we have people coming to the RAF Families Federation distressed because they're caught up in it. Women are overrepresented in that system. Therefore, that has got to be a factor in women's experience of the military. I personally haven't experienced it, so I'm not coming at it from personal experience, but I do know of others who have been let down by it. So if we can make recommendations around the reform or the independence of that system and a deep-rooted change from where it currently is, I would wholeheartedly support that.
Maria, that's a great segue. So watch in on the 18th of March for the second session, which will be all about the service complaints and the service justice system. So thank you very much for that. Questions, but 42% of women leave the military within sort of a few years, 5 years after having a family. So that is obviously an indicator of why women are leaving. But Emma, do you want to pick up on the last few questions, please?
Thanks, Chair. Morning, Maria. Morning, Anna. Thanks for being with us. Just to revisit some of the themes that you've already touched on in this session, and I know at the start you both personally spoke about your reasons for leaving the armed forces, but I was just wondering, is there any more light you can shed on that about why other women are leaving the armed forces? And I'm happy to take Anna first and then Maria.
So I think one of the challenges is the perception of women that they can't speak up about the challenges. So they'll talk to us about the logistic, I'm thinking of dual serving couples. Typically when I speak to a dual serving couple, they talk to me about the logistics and how, he's here and she's there and how do they actually manage, and we need 6 months notice in order to decide who will have the children. And so I think if we move to a culture where it's okay for women to talk about the challenges of childcare and for men to lean in and also take equal responsibility for the childcare, then I think we'd be in a better place in terms of openness and the conversations that need to happen in the service.
And in your evidence, Diane, you spoke of several problems with service complaint system. What changes, if any, would you like to see here, and how about the wider service justice system?
Yes, thank you for that question. And very much when I started, my belief is that the heart of the problem is the service complaint system. It is being called by its own ombudsman as failing, ineffective, inefficient and unfair for the last 5 years, and it replaced a system that had failed. So any organisation that has a complaint system that fundamentally does not work is going to struggle to improve the situation for those who are most vulnerable. I've been through it myself. It's great to have the lived experience. It is the most perverse, toxic and unpleasant experience, quite frankly. You can hear it in my voice. It is truly damaging to people's mental health, the current complaint system. And I fundamentally recommend reform of this system. I don't believe it can be done by the military itself. It really needs an independent body, but it is damaging. And the service justice system is equally toxic. We have a large proportion for very small armed forces of military police, 3 separate services, all investigating incidents that could mostly be dealt with by the civilian police. I believe this is also perverse, and these 2 issues are causing deep harm to any vulnerable people, and that includes the women who we are representing.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on equipment and some of the evidence we collected. Going back to attire, combat pyjamas, some of the evidence we collected actually said that you can take 6 months to order a pair of 3-layer gloves for a woman with a small hand, which is actually no use if you're going on deployment in 3 weeks. And also about body armour, that it doesn't fit correctly, it rises up, and one woman complained when she was on deployment she was unable to get into a crouch to fire position with an SA-80. Now, whilst gloves are an inconvenience, operational effectiveness is now compromised because she can't get into an adequate firing position. And really, what does that say for her personal safety? And the message I got from our evidence was that the MOD need to get their basics correct first. But I am aware that the MOD are looking at this and looking also at the issue of sanitary products on deployment, which came up quite highly and frequently in our survey.
Yes, there's been mention about those who've left the forces and their difficulties of continuing with claims. But apart from that, how well are the needs and situations of female veterans in the UK understood? And that's particularly addressed to Paula.
In my opinion, I don't think that they're understood at all. When I first started this job in 2017, I did a mapping exercise to see what kind of services were out there, because I didn't want to replicate and duplicate, because I don't think it's very helpful to veterans. And when I looked around, there was no gender-specific services at all. All of the charities out there, although women weren't excluded, the majority of the charities were accessed by men. And run by men and very male-centric. So from a research point of view, I couldn't find any services. And then I started looking at literature that was out there, if there was any evidence of the needs of women veterans, so that I could create a service that was needs-led. And I couldn't find any research either. So I don't think the needs of women veterans are understood. It's a complex issue, and there needs to be more work done to understand the issues that they face.